Cultivating Calmness Podcast. Today I want to talk to you about boundaries. Yep, you've heard of them. You're probably involved in some kind of boundary with somebody in your life right now as we speak. And if you're not, you probably will be at some point in your life. But I want to talk today a little bit about what a boundary is and what a boundary is not, and maybe some of those misconceptions you have heard, and what I really talk to my clients about in their therapy sessions related to the boundaries that they set and keep with somebody else in their life. To start off, if you look up the definition of a boundary, it's basically a limit. Okay, well, there are lots of boundaries that are in our lives. Some people, we might call them laws or rules, right? Those are expectations that are put in place. Usually, though, those are on somebody else. I compare them and I say, a boundary is kind of like a law or a rule, but in reverse. Because a boundary is something that we put in place for ourselves. So it is something that is marking what is acceptable and unacceptable within a relationship. Okay, so when we talk about boundaries within a therapeutic setting, we are talking about the way in which we engage in relationships with somebody else. And sometimes that requires setting a boundary or a limit. And that limit is not for the other person. Okay, so I want that to be clear. When we set a boundary, we are not making a rule that we want somebody else to follow. For example, if you are in a relationship with somebody, again, it could be a spouse, a partner, a child, a friend, another family member, fill in the blank, any kind of relationship you have with somebody else. And let's say that they are a heavy drinker and you are tired of it and you don't want it anymore. And you say, you are not going to drink in this house or else. That is putting a limit on them, and we cannot make them do that. We can wish it, we can ask it, we can try to demand it, but we cannot make them do that thing. Like not drinking or not cussing at me or not talking to me this way or not treating me in a certain way. I cannot make anybody else do anything. Now, when it comes to setting a boundary, we are saying what we are willing or not willing to do or to tolerate as it pertains to how I interact with this other person. So when it comes to drinking, it may look something like this. I do not like when you drink. Therefore, if you are drinking or drunk around me, I will remove myself and I will no longer have any communication or contact with you until you are sober. So I then have to remove myself and follow what I've just said I would do. If it's somebody who keeps coming to you for money and they never pay you back, when they come and ask you for money, you're going to say something like, I will not be giving you any more money because you never pay me back. And then you don't give them any money. And that is a rule that you are putting in place for yourself to protect you. And so there are lots of ways that we protect ourselves with boundaries. That could be a physical protection, an emotional protection, mental, financial, spiritual, social, right? All the different aspects of our lives, we are trying to protect ourselves from the world around us and from the things that are happening to us from others. Okay. So boundaries are put in place to protect us and to, keep our sanity and to help us. Sometimes setting boundaries, or a lot of times setting a boundary, is really difficult because it oftentimes requires us to say no or for us to make some kind of change that may be uncomfortable. It may feel like I'm going to hurt somebody else, like, oh, it might hurt their feelings that I say no, or it might upset them. And yeah, that may be required, that may be needed for you to be healthy. an example of a financial boundary. Maybe somebody who enjoys donating their time, their resources, their energy to another cause. But maybe that cause is kind of taking advantage of their generosity. Or maybe the other cause isn't taking advantage, but they just keep giving and giving and giving and giving until they have nothing left. That kind of relates to you filling your cup, right? And if you have an empty cup, you can't pour from it. If you are drained of your finances because you're giving it all to a cause that you really want to support and you really want to do well, are you going to be able to continue to support this cause if you don't have anything left to give them? So a boundary may be, I am only going to donate X amount of time per a month or X amount of money per a month. And then I will have to devote, maybe other resources like my time instead of my money to the cause, to be able to promote the cause that I want to promote. So a boundary is to protect us, not to make somebody else do something. Now, by setting that limit and by having that boundary, you may cause the other person to make a better choice that you are happier with. So in the example of the drinking example, it's, I'm not going to tolerate you being around my kids when you're intoxicated. So if I get any inkling that you are intoxicated, I will ask you to leave, or I will leave myself from the situation. And then I follow through with it. And then that person's like, oh man, I never get to see my grandkids, or I never get to see you because I'm always intoxicated. Maybe I don't want to do that. And then maybe that means they start to show up to your house, sober. And maybe that eventually leads to them, not drinking alcohol at all. Or it just may mean that they have decided that you are more important and that they want to spend time with you. So when they are around you, they make the active choice to not drink around you. But maybe they still drink when they're on their own and when they're not around you. But they have chosen that they want to have that relationship with you, so they make that change. And then you don't have to enforce that boundary anymore because they have made the change that you have essentially asked for. I hope that makes sense. So we cannot make the other people do anything, but you can set a limit, which may cause the change you are looking for to continue a relationship. That's more of like a physical boundary. An emotional boundary, maybe like not tolerating the way someone is speaking to you. So I've used the example of like if I'm having a conversation with somebody on the phone and they're cussing me out or they're calling me names, I may say as like a warning, I'm not going to tolerate you talking to me like that. If you continue to do that, I'm going to hang up on you. Click. And then they call back. Hi, if you would like to speak to me without cussing or, with proper language, I'd be happy to continue this conversation. Click. I'm no longer going to answer your phone calls if, today. I am done today. You're going to have to, we'll have to continue this conversation again. Click. And then you follow through. You don't answer the phone calls. You don't talk. The next time you do the same thing and you keep doing that. And yeah, that may make it difficult for you to have a conversation with this person if they want to continue to talk to you in a certain way that you feel maybe isn't respectful to you. And that is sad. That is hard. That's why boundaries are hard, because it could mean that you sever that relationship. It could mean that that person doesn't want to communicate with you or be involved with you because your boundary is too strict for them. That, that happens, and that's hard. And that's why some people don't set boundaries, because they want to have some kind of connection with this person and they like certain things about them, but maybe they don't like other things about them. And they're willing to kind of trade that off. I'm willing to put up with it because I don't want to lose them completely. And that's a choice you have to make. And often a difficult choice. I have this conversation with lots of people. I don't want you to have to cut out your family members or your best friend or anything like that. But if it becomes too painful to have to see or do or interact with this person for whatever the reason is for you, then you may have to set that boundary. I know I've had to do it. It's incredibly hard. I've had to, mute social media profiles, because whenever I see certain things on there, it upsets me and maybe I can't stop myself from wanting to say something. So in order to protect myself and in order to limit the stress that it causes me, I've had to either block or limit what I can see so that, I'm protecting myself. They can continue doing whatever they want to do, whatever it is, whether it's a, kind of public profile of like a celebrity or a news outlet or something, or if it's a friend. I've had to do that for different reasons on different topics for different platforms. And that's because I know what affects me the most and what may be more beneficial for me to kind of set that limit with. And again, that's a protection for me and my well-being, that I set that boundary for me. I can't make other people do anything. And sometimes those other people notice that you're doing it, sometimes they don't. I encourage you to let people know when you're setting a boundary. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not always possible or appropriate or necessary. It really just depends on the situation. But if it's possible, I often encourage people to have that conversation with the person. Like, hey, look, I'm going to start doing this whenever this happens because it's just XYZ for me. It's too stressful for me. It upsets me. Therefore, anytime this happens, I am going to have to react in this way. And that's just, how it's going to be. So that way that person is prepared. So if that's the I'm going to hang up on you conversation, then they know that when they do that, you've given them pre-warning. And then maybe they say their cuss word on the phone to you and you're like, look, I warned you, I'm going to hang up. If you do it again, I'm going to hang up. And then they do it, inevitably will do it again. And then you're going to hang up. And I've had this conversation with people in the inpatient setting when it had to do with like drugs and alcohol and letting their kids back in their homes. And one of the unfortunate, boundaries is not letting them back in your home. That is to protect you and everybody else in your home, your finances, your physical safety, maybe even other realms of safety for you. And the risk is that they may never come back. The risk is that they could seriously hurt themselves, that they could die because of their choices. And that is a very hard thing to potentially have happen by setting a boundary. That does not make it your fault. If somebody else does something to hurt themselves or to alienate themselves or, to do, otherwise harm themselves because you set a boundary to protect yourself, that is not your fault. That is a choice that they made after you probably spent lots of time and energy and money trying to protect them and trying to help them make better choices. But we can't make other people make better choices for themselves. We can only make those choices for ourselves. And those are just examples of like sometimes the extremes of boundaries. Shutting someone out and not letting them back in your home could mean that they may be homeless, could mean that they're on the streets, that could mean that they're selling themselves to make money or doing things to make money that is even worse than living in your home. Those things are all possible. You're not going to make somebody change because you love them enough. And I wish that were the case. That happens all the time, and I see it all the time, and I wish people would change because we love them. But people have to decide what they want more, and they have to decide if something's important enough to them, and if, they recognize that they have a problem, whatever that problem is. Even if it's just between you and one other person. Maybe it's not a big problem they have in their life, but it's the interaction and the way that they treat certain people in their lives. Myself included, there are probably times where people have set boundaries with me. And I know I have set boundaries with other people. It's never an easy choice, and it doesn't feel good all the way around. And you can't make people do things you want them to do. You can only make yourself do things. So all of this is to say that we set boundaries to protect ourselves, not to make somebody else do something different or to do what we want them to do. Would love that, but that's why we set a boundary in the hopes that the change happens. But maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And that's what sometimes can make boundaries really hard. Within your home, it's, maybe just setting those limits. You're not, I won't hand over your tablet until these things are done, and then sticking to it. You're not going to talk to me that way. And then I have a expectation of what that means and what that looks like. Because if you do talk to me this way, then XYZ, may happen. For you. Again, that's a little different. It's not quite a boundary when we're talking about our kids, because there's usually like consequences that we are enforcing, but it's still you saying, I will not tolerate XYZ, and therefore this is going to happen, whether it's something I'm going to do or something I'm going to enforce with, say, my children. So I hope that clears things up. Yes, you can cut out your family members and never have contact with them again. That is an option. Although if you have a difference in political view or religious view or view on like medical treatments, fill in the blank, does that mean you should never have a relationship with them? Or is that maybe one of those boundaries like, hey, let's not talk about these things. If you can respect my boundary, I'll respect yours. That can be difficult with politics, but or any topic really, but you both can make an active choice to stay away from certain topics because you know that it hurts the other person. And if you really love that person, you may decide, hey, I'm willing to do that with you because I love you and I don't want to push you away. But maybe with my other friends and other family members, we can talk about that because I know that we agree. But for this particular person, I will make an effort to not do that because I love them in other ways for other reasons. I would encourage you to try that route rather than completely cutting somebody out of your life. And sometimes that does mean just really strict boundaries. Sometimes that does mean minimal contact. It doesn't mean tons of contact. Maybe that's necessary. Maybe that's okay. You don't have to have all kinds of contact to have a relationship with somebody. I hope this helps. I hope you learned something. I'm always learning new ways to enforce, set, talk about, learn about boundaries. I hope you've learned something today too. Thank you for joining me. I will see you again next week.